Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you happenstance into this incredible panel dialogue with the new Untouchables. We are recording this on Friday, July 25th, 2025. And it's been such an outrageous week that we lead off with Trey Stone and Matt Parker and South Park's execution, of course, that you shared with me, Paul Peltier, which everybody can't get enough of. Obviously, South Park sending the middle finger to Paramount because of the mega merger with Skydance and all things satire. But I mean, this is where we are, Paul, where the entire country has been basically relegated to South Park in context to what I like to call the Mad Magazine Mad King, within context of all things what we've been talking about the last 2 weeks, Epstein, and that what we just saw today. I mean, I think I'm just going to tee you up to let it rip right now. It's like you've got the par five right in front of you, and you're stepping in here with a driver, Paul. What are you looking at?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, Trump's playbook is diversion, right? Anytime someone gets near something, some credible allegation that they can pin on Trump or affect Trump negatively, he creates these diversions. So the one wonderful thing about the like thunderstorm going on here, the one thing that Trey Parker did is they really tried to provoke Trump, I think, into either calling off the Paramount deal or to suing Paramount. And it was just a little taste of his own medicine. I thought it was wonderfully and beautifully done. And I think it exposes sort of the depth of the corruption of what's going on in the White House. And I think anytime anyone can expose the corruption to people who aren't otherwise privy to it or paying attention to it, I think it's great. I think it opens up to a much wider audience the level of corruption that's going on in this administration. So I think that's what I see as number one. Number two is I think that it helps expose what has been in the news for about 3 weeks now, and that is his relationship with Epstein and what that might have really been. And so what we see in terms of the diversion and in terms of the corruption is him, Donald Trump, and Pam Bondi sending Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, to speak with Ghislaine Maxwell, a convicted child predator, a groomer, who is probably worked for one of the most prolific child predators that's ever been convicted in the United States. One of the most prolific, probably the most prolific. And rather than sitting down and talking with her about how they can recompense the victims, it's very clear to me that first of all, it's never happened before that we have a DAG sitting down with a child predator, the purpose of which can only be to see if they can find a way she can exonerate Trump and take the heat off of Trump. And so I just think that it's despicable. I think it's absolutely par for the course for Trump. But what it says about the Justice Department, we're not talking about the victims. He's not meeting with her to talk about a continuing investigation. He can only be talking about one thing, and that is how they can get her to exonerate Trump with a benefit to her of a potential pardon. So I think that it is just incredible the level of corruption and the level of duplicity that the Department of Justice is engaged in here on behalf of who they perceive to be their only client, and that's Donald Trump. That's my 2 cents about that.
And a quick follow up, just the point though, Matt Parker and Trey Stone inked a $1.2 billion deal in light of Skydance was an $8 billion deal. I'm doing the math in my head and I'm thinking to myself, wow, these guys proved that satire is definitely green, right? And so the king of comedy But with in the wit, and it never ends with Mr. William K. Black, who can always see humor and a silver lining amidst the darkest of black skies, which we're in the midst of. Bill, what are some of your thoughts, given what?
By the way, I love the fact that they issued the episode and the ink wasn't even dry on their contract, which was so beautiful.
And they're circulating pictures of themselves flipping off Paramount and Sky. But all things being serious, I mean, this Epstein situation in the DOJ bill is obviously no joke, although it is a joke, right?
Yeah, let me start with Paul's. And of course, Charlie Chaplin, the great dictator in 1940, was dead on the satire of Hitler. So I think this is quite consciously in that vein, and the vein of the fool in the king's court, who was the only one that could speak truth to these royal idiots as well, by hiding it in the satire. And it contrasts, of course, with virtually all the elites. So, why did President Obama have to be threatened with an absurd prosecution to actually finally sort of kind of say something? And even then, it was milquetoast in response to all of these things. So, let me go to Paul's point. What the three of us that are ex-Justice Department folks know very well is the DAG ain't just the Deputy Attorney General. Traditionally, the DAG runs the Justice Department, right? The Attorney General is the face person that does the speeches and such, but the DAG actually runs the place. And then Paul can really bring this out because this is much more on the criminal side than the civil side where June and I were. I don't think I have words to convey how outrageous it is to hold press conferences and say that people are guilty of capital offenses and should be imprisoned as as any Justice Department official, period. I mean, if any of us as trial attorneys had done anything similar, we certainly would have been sanctioned by our bosses. We might very well have been fired on the spot. Indeed, if we had done what Trump and others have done, a whole series like Tulsi Gabbard and such have done, we would assuredly have been fired within a half hour, right? This is completely outrageous. This destroys any system of justice. This is generations of efforts by the Justice Department to prevent anything remotely close to this because it is so destructive. And, again, as civil attorneys, we don't live with the U.S. attorney. It's the manual and such in the way Paul and his colleagues do. But I am sure that it is suffused with stuff saying you don't do this. Like at the end of every indictment release, it says these are only charges, right? So this almost certainly had to be done by the top people at Justice Department because nobody who had grown up in the Justice Department could be coerced into doing this, right? There's a reason it comes from the bosses, and it comes to the point again. When you have a system based on lies, you're going to get completely unethical people. They're going to have to lie all the time. That means they're going to have to violate everybody's rights if the boss wants and violated, and to lie about those things. So lying isn't a little thing. It's a cancer that spreads invariably, and it produces a kakistocracy, a rule by the absolute worst. And these people are human failures. Forget lawyer failures. They are human failures.
And the Justice Manual, you're right, Bill. The Justice Manual absolutely prescribes anything like that. Proscribes it. You can't do it. So there's rules, and and think of the message it sends to the rank and file when you just completely implicate someone in a crime without even an indictment. Never mind an indictment. Implicate someone in a crime, and the rules, of course, say you can't do that. And you can, when someone's charged, you might, but the Fifth Circuit would say it would be a violation of someone's due process to do that. But and the 11th Circuit would say that as well. But yeah, it's an absolute violation of the law. And just to put a gloss on the point of how important the DAG is to the administration of the at least the criminal side of the Department of Justice. I like to say that the reason why the president's corporate fraud task force worked as it relates to the Enron and accounting scandals that I was familiar with is because the DAG was appointed by executive order to take charge of that program, the president's corporate fraud task force. The DAG at the time was Larry Thompson, very astute and capable former U.S. attorney from Atlanta. And then after him, it was James Comey, who this was way before he jumped the shark and was actually absolutely had a very credible and good reputation. And he took the president's corporate fraud task force forward. And one of the reasons why those corporate fraud task force was so effective is that we had a DAG who was powerful and took charge of it. And that's sort of what they're supposed to do. The reason why there was no prosecutions in the, and we've talked about this, Patrick and Bill and June, the reason why there were no prosecutions is because there was no DAG in charge of that task force. The Attorney General took it upon himself to run that task force by executive order to run this sort of no task force, and nothing happened because of it. So that's how important an effective DAG is to the department, running the Department of Justice.
June, I started off, with kind of a, I don't know, whimsical sort of, nod to satire. But again, every single day, especially in context, what you've been revealing and laying out for us for now several months, just the disintegration of anything A, honorable, or B, professional. Like Bill had mentioned last week, this is less than the JV, but it's hitting such monumental repercussions that it's hard to really rationalize. And while we were talking, the New York Times had just posted that the White House is going to release 5.5 billion in frozen education funds. And I'm thinking that in context to, we saw Columbia capitulate this week. We see Penn capitulate this week. If I'm thinking about this, Stu, I'll tell you the one thing that this Trump administration has taught me that I never, ever fully reconciled in my mind prior to watching it all lay down post Doge and moving forward, how much education has been connected to the federal government and how.
Oh, all right. So when I was out in Silicon Valley, one of the questions was, why is Silicon Valley special? And the answer, it begins with the defense industry. When you talk about tech, you start with the defense industry financing the big defense companies and Stanford. And that this is the beginning of the internet. When Al Gore says, I invented the internet, what he's really saying is the military-industrial complex with federal funding jump-started Silicon Valley. When you then said, is circa year 2000, why is Silicon Valley special? The answer was, it has Berkeley, Stanford, UCSF, University of California, San Francisco, a major medical research arm, and what you've got, and federal funding. And don't forget, federal funding is what jumpstarts basic research. Companies do the applied stuff. You want the innovation that unlocks some secret of the atom. That comes from federal spending. Companies are very good at monetizing it, profiting off it. The inventions, the discoveries come from federal funding, and they come from major research centers. When I moved to Missouri, one of the things that people were trying to persuade Missouri, an utterly benighted state, where they think universities should be run by like businesses. What does that mean? That means you never invest in basic research. And there was an effort to convince the Board of Trustees that what jumpstarts regional economies is major universities that can attract federal research funds. Then the discoveries that come out of that fund the applications that private companies implement. Minnesota, when I moved here, was delightful because the business community and the trustees of the university understood that. In Missouri, they don't. They hire the failed CEO at Sprint to run the university system, and he thinks you should get rid of, got the pension plan and persuade people like me to leave because there's clearly no future in the state. Okay, so that's the source of innovation. Now, here's the thing about all these scandals. We're missing the big picture. Let's talk about universities. Yeah, Trump's busy imposing his authoritarian state, but what he's really trying to do is destroy universities the same way Republicans have destroyed unions. Why? Because they're center of the opposition to them. That's the story. There's a wholesale assault going on against universities and against public education. Public education, with this being led by Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, who blocked funding at the height of the financial crisis recession. Public schools, many of them in low-tax states, have still not recovered from the 2009 crisis in terms of overall spending on public education, destroying public education. So you can have homeschooling, charter schools, Christian schools. That's what this story is about. That's the big picture. So let's come back to Epstein. Too much fun. You know, I just think everything about Epstein. So let me give you my big picture takes. First, no one Trump freaked out initially. He was saying there's nothing to see here, and Comey and Obama made it all up. What does that mean? That means there is something to see here. Now, I think we need to be asking, what is there to see here? We've known for zillions of years. Trump says it all the time. Hey, Jeff Epstein was my best bud until we had a falling out, and then it ended. But we knew that. We knew they were close. So there's got to be something that scares him in those files. And I leave to your imaginations what that is. But I want to talk about Obama. Why is he going after Obama? Let's be very clear about the big picture. He's saying when there was credible evidence in the middle of an election that Russia was trying to throw the election for Donald Trump, that it was treason to investigate it. Think about that. Now, think about the so-called Russia hoax. Let's go back to the Mueller investigation. The Mueller investigation found Russia was trying to influence the election. The Mueller investigation indicted a host of Russian agents. No trials because they're in Russia. And if they stepped foot in the US, they would be arrested. But there is no Russia hoax. There is concrete evidence that Russia interfered with the 2016 election on Trump's behalf. That's what he's saying. A validated allegation that because Obama investigated it, it's treason. It's only treason against Trump. So we should be getting to the bottom of Trump's relationship with Russia, which at the very least is welcoming their interference on his behalf. Any president who doesn't investigate Russian interference in our elections is committing treason. And I leave to you who is guilty of that. Okay? On further sexual abuse allegations, how about Pam Bondi? Pam Bondi became Attorney General of Florida, promising to investigate sexual abuse, and she brought 14 investigations or so against small fry. But what about Epstein? But what we really want to know, especially this group, is follow the money. Okay, follow the money. You know there's going to be all kinds of corporate fraud. Maybe it has something to do with sexual abuse, maybe it doesn't. But if Jeffrey Epstein is involved in this, We know he's a liar and a cheat. There's going to be all kinds of crooked stuff going on involving Jeffrey Epstein and banks and money laundering and who knows what else. And who knows who's involved in it? Where's the investigation? And uh, Maxwell almost certainly can't testify to the details of that, even if she knows enough to point investigators in the right direction. So there's a whole lot to talk about.
Well, not to mention the fact that media isn't going to be able to do it, hence why we're together and why we had to make the con to begin with, to go lead to the people that have been doing the good work forever, which I bring it back to you, Paul. I mean, we're going to go into details on what you profess forward, but I have to follow up based on June what she said because of what you said 2 weeks ago. And I'm blown away by this because I've been paying attention to this Les Wexner scenario where he signed over power of attorney to Jeffrey Epstein, and this guy's a multi-billionaire. And it's like, even if he had some sort of, relationship, what billionaire signs over a multi-billion-dollar operation, a power of attorney for love? Or, I mean, I'm being silly here because the whole thing's insane, right? And you've got that, and you mentioned Tower. Was it Tower Financial? The missing billion or 1.5 billion at this stage? Can you just pick up just really briefly before we move on to Emil Bove and others and just comment on follow the money? You're on mute. You're on mute.
To June's point, Pam Bondi was Attorney General of Florida when the Epstein case was turned over to the feds in 2006, my recollection, because the state of Florida would not do what was necessary to prosecute him and hold him accountable, number one. Number two, the feds in Miami were obviously not up to the task. They were influenced both politically and otherwise by politically higher ups to drop or to let him plead to 2 state counts of solicitation of prostitution, which, if you think about it, it's batshit crazy. What you're doing is calling these 14-year-old girls prostitutes, which they were not. And so just by letting him plead guilty to that, you're sending the message that these 14-year-old girls are somehow on the market as prostitutes, as opposed to being there sexually abused as minors by him. So that's the first point. The second point is no one ever, and well, that leads into my second point, which is no one ever took these victims seriously. And there were more than 100 of them. They weren't just in the United States, they were all over the world. And so no one ever took them seriously. And if you did take them seriously, you would want to recompense them. So it always struck me as crazy that you weren't following the money with respect to Jeffrey Epstein, because you would want these women and these girls to be recompensed for all of the shit that they went through with him that ruined their lives, leading one of them 2 weeks ago to suicide, right? So then we fast forward. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn, in Southern District of New York takes over the case. And by the way, sex trafficking has no statute of limitations, none. So there is an unlimited time to investigate those people who participated with Jeffrey Epstein in his sex trafficking enterprise. It just seems to me there was never an appetite for that, because if that was the case, you had the perfect, Southern District of New York had the perfect opportunity to do that. They had her and they had him and they had all of the evidence. Yet no one seemed to ever want to follow the money, which, as we discussed last week, would have absolutely led to a hodgepodge of frauds that high value frauds that he was involved in, and would have led to other people who were involved in his sexual predatory behavior. And so let's go to Trump now, just for a minute. We just saw this week that a couple of things happened that we knew happened, but of course, it was hidden from us by the Department of Justice, and that was Pam Bondi told Trump, your name is in these files a lot, because it is. Number one. And number two, she said before she looked at him, all of it was on her desk and it was going to be released. Now, of course, they're saying they can't release it because it's got names of victims and all that crap in it, which is very easy to block out or to black out. You don't have to. You can purge those names and still produce in her words, truckloads of evidence. You could still produce that evidence, but they can't. Why? Because Trump's name is all over it. And what does he fear? Trump doesn't fear that he's going to be associated with Epstein. He said he could stand up on Fifth Avenue and kill somebody, and no one would give a shit. And that's true about all of his followers as it relates to friendships with Epstein. But Trump knows what he did with Epstein better than anybody. Mm-hmm. And that one letter that so far is the link that he sent for a birthday card, where he says it's good to have pals like we have, number one, and number two, and we have secrets. Now, what the fuck could those secrets be that he would be worried about and not want to tell? And I will tell you, there's only one answer to that, and that is improper behavior with women and probably underage women. So that's what bothers Trump, that this will be exposed in some way. And and he's now using the Department of Justice as a sword against that information now, and a whole bunch of other things, falsely accusing Obama of criminal espionage and treasonous behavior. And remember, the thing that he calls Russia and a hoax, the Senate bipartisan committee led by Little Marco Rubio said that there was a corrupt influence by Russia to try and influence that investigation. There's not a scintilla of doubt about it. Influence the investigation towards Trump. So again, corruption on every level. And June was 100% right. This is not going to go away easily, but the MAGA base, I fear, will never abandon him, regardless of the MAGA base has this fascination with child molesters, but they will never believe, absent videotape of Donald Trump going into a room with a 14-year-old, they'll never believe he's a child molester. But their fascination is with child molesters, not with Trump as being potentially one. And that's why they want these files released.
And that's an understatement. It has been since it blew up on X when Elon Musk took over. The first thing that it was trending a year ago was all of this sort of expression of, well, it was then Pizzagate, right? It just seems like it was planted, and I'm not sure what they know in the algorithms. But Bill, I want to turn this to you, considering actually, I want to point out to the audience, if you're just discovering this for the first time, who you just heard from is a gentleman who worked at the Department of Justice for nearly 3 decades, was involved with some of the top criminal investigations and indictments and convictions of white-collar fraud that would blow your mind, that go around the world and back again. Paul Peltier has been a subject of Alex Gibney documentaries. He's been involved with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and all of the FinCEN files and SARS. I mean, we're talking to elite status inside the Department of Justice. And I turn my attention, of course, William K. Black, who should be a household name in the United States, that should be every single night on MSNBC or on the front page of the New York Times. But we're literally relegated at this stage of the game to help get these truths out there and these perspectives, because, Bill, think about this from the perspective of what Paul had just laid out, but also what was been revealed this week, that the FBI apparently had 1,000 agents scouring these files for anything that could potentially, obviously, indict Trump or at least bring him to the surface. And this on top of the front page of the New York Times yesterday, that the Pam Bondi's Department of Justice had notified Trump that he was mentioned in the so-called files or whatever they actually are. So on top of that, in terms of resources and everything else, I mean, this is just got to be something that is one of the most twisted things you've ever seen.
Okay, assuming that last report is true, which I can't independently verify, um, that would be equivalent to more than the entire white collar staff of the FBI. So think about that they took, and that's precisely the kind of folks that they would have taken if they were really trying to learn about these things. And so it was like, stop every investigation in the department about elite white collar crime. Why? Because they want to stop. And as we've gone through in a number of episodes, it's now like 100 different ways they've sought to make America safe from the most elite predators, right? The robber barons, and have succeeded. So they don't treat that as a cost. They treat that as a further benefit. Of course, they are the president's lawyers. They're not the Justice Department or the Justice Department's investigators, right? They're Trump's people now, and that's the mindset that they want. Let me add one bit to what Paul has been quite appropriately emphasizing, right? The bleated concern that we can't release information because the victims could be harmed. Has Donald Trump ever expressed concern for the victims of this? I only know one person he's expressed concern for, and that is Ghislaine, the perpetrator. And it isn't just that she groomed. The testimony is that she participated in 3 ways to abuse the minors. So she is astonishingly culpable under the truth. And to send the DAG and not your substantive people is, as Paul said, just an absolute pure signal that everybody understands, right? They do the quiet part out loud. In fact, they scream the quiet part. They want you to know that there are no guardrails. They want you to know that the Justice Department is no longer a Justice Department. It is a weapon and a shield so that the President of the United States and his cronies can engage in all kinds of depravity, right? From money to sex, and it can do so with impunity, and we will come after you. And that's one of the reasons. As Paul says, it's a distraction, it's his common technique, but it's also a signal in signaling theory to say, we'll go after the former president of the United States. Because the message is, we can go after anyone. Absolutely anyone. There's no rule of law anymore, right? And maybe we won't succeed in putting you in prison, but we will destroy your name with 35% of the United States population, and we'll try to bankrupt you. And then we'll go after the law firms that defend you to try to bankrupt them. And then we'll go after, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This doesn't stop. And that's the point. They want us to believe that they're all powerful and that we must not resist, which is why what I would like to end on from my contribution is Obama should be fighting. Obama should go every day in front of the cameras and say, yeah, great, indict me. Indict me. Bring that prosecution. I welcome it. You're a fascist. And your prosecution is going to fail. And we're going to demonstrate just the types of things Paul was saying, that there's a bipartisan finding that this occurred. And then who are you going to get to be your lead prosecutor of Obama? Now think about that one for a bit. Because you ain't going to get anybody who's a career skilled prosecutor to bring that case. So it's going to be one of his political hacks, and they will get ripped to shreds. So please, Obama, you've sat on the sidelines while this has happened. Come out every day and give a press conference. Have a big wall, a sign in the wall. One day since they said they had conclusive proof that I'd committed treason. 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. You can turn these things around, but you have to fight. And that's the idea of the resistance.
Well, Bill,
Just
go ahead,
just
Paul.
a point on that. I think a big tell was when Trump was talking about going after Obama. He said, right or wrong, we should go after him. Right or wrong. That was a huge tell that he knew that going after him might be the wrong thing to do, but he was going to do it because number one, he needed to create a distraction, and number two, he's a vengeful son of a bitch. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, again, coming from your incredible experience, but Bill, to pick up on that, the magnitude of Obama not at the moment doing that just reminds me all the time of just this magnitude of what we've been dealing with since you were doing what you were doing quite a while ago, and that we're relatively sidelined, I guess. Thank God we found you because of just you doing what you do for the American people, right? And so the kleptocrats, what Obama did during the great financial crisis, what Eric Holder didn't do with regards to Wall Street, made the domino happen that continues, and here we are. But you're right about pushing back. But I found it this intersection between what you just said and I know what this intersection is. Maybe people won't immediately gravitate to it, but in addition to this insanity with all things Epstein, in the midst of it all, you've got Donald Trump storming over to the Federal Reserve and trying to kneecap Jerome Powell and all that. I mean, can you comment on what you've been looking at this past week?
That one was funny, bad. So, again, Trump, not bright, not remotely bright. So he's going to try to use his real estate hat. I know construction. He actually, of course, doesn't. And David Kay can do a great riff on this. He's known for his really crappy construction as well, and illegal construction. But hey, we'll move past that. And so he's going to catch Powell in an overrun of expenses on a building in New York City. Wow, that's never happened to anybody. That could only happen for dishonest reason. But apparently he can't find any evidence. So he says, yeah, you're budgeted for, I think it was 2.75 billion, but it's really up to 3.1. Right? And it's obviously an ambush. He's got the paper in his pocket. Woo, he's going to pull it on him. But Powell just says, you're saying that came from us? Us being the Federal Reserve? And Trump says, yeah, here it is. Powell reads it. He goes, you've added another building in. He said, yeah, but it's 3.1 billion. We built it 5 years ago. Construction. So it's just, and this comes back again. Who is going to testify if they try Obama? Who the hell are they going to put on the stand? Because they're going to have to lie. And they're going to have to lie in the grand jury when they make their presentation. And they are setting so many people up to be sanctioned. for telling these lies, right? They've got an infographic that, an 8-year-old could produce that Tulsi is filling the, X with and such. You can use all of those things against the prosecution. We don't do things like that as well, not we. Paul can tell you, you don't do things like that as a prosecutor. I can tell you as a plaintiff's, lawyer for the government. You don't do that because you will be torn apart by competent lawyers. You again, people I think assume government lawyers are, like government, it's kind of bureaucratic, not very good. There are, of course, some government attorneys who are not particularly effective, but many, many, many thousands of the best lawyers, the best investigators, not just in America, but in the world, in terms of elite white collar crime and corruption, they're government lawyers. And Paul has already mentioned this. It's going to take us a minimum of a generation to restore a Justice Department and an FBI to effectiveness. And that is Trump's goal. June is right. They want to destroy our ability, but they don't want to just destroy it now. They want to destroy it for as long as they can. They want generational incapacity so that the robber barons can predate with impunity.
Well, I'm glad we all see, the light because of what we've been continuing to press forward. In June, along those lines, in the context of the corruption that, Paul has laid down and Bill continues to deliver for decades. But here we have Emil Bove as a representation of one of these incompetent Trump goons that, and everything surrounding him. Do you want to pick up on your assessment of what you've been seeing since this entire circus has been underway?
Sure, and it's important to emphasize the Supreme Court's complicity in this because what you've got is you've got a district court judge who said, in a manner the Supreme Court has largely agreed with, there have to be due process rights, and he ordered the planes not to take off, and the planes took off. And we've got the whistleblower saying that Bove was behind that, behind sending Abrego to Garcia to El Salvador, even though it was a mistake and there was an order against him. You've got that. So normally, district courts hold people in contempt. But why hasn't there been a contempt proceeding? Because it's being held up. Boasberg apparently said something today about wanting to pursue it. But you've got the question, all right, referrals to the bar of development of the facts underlying the contempt, all of which should mean this guy has no business being a lawyer. He ought to be disbarred, much less put on the Court of Appeals and groomed for a Supreme Court appointment, which is what everybody assumes Trump is trying to do. How to destroy our courts. We have a generation of conservative courts. We have a lawless Supreme Court, but we don't have people who don't believe in the judicial rule. In some idea of the operation of the judiciary. Trump's cronies are whatever Trump does. Hey, I'm a judge. I look at who the litigants are. I see Republican. I vote for them. That's what we're talking about. People like principled conservative judges like Harvey Wilkinson on the Fourth Circuit have said no to that. Trump wants to get rid of those people, or people who will be loyal only to him. And if that's the mindset, they ought to be disbarred. Emil Bove should be disbarred if the allegations of the whistleblower, and we have no reason to believe they aren't true, are correct. And we have the courts not going ahead with these allegations, which are serious allegations of contempt and supporting perjury in front of a federal court and obstruction of justice and any number of crimes. And we don't have a judge who's quite willing to hold a contempt proceeding that says you lawyer did wrong and point the finger at Bove from proceeding with that investigation, and resolution.
Wow, unbelievable. It's just so hard to even consider that any of this is a possibility. And turning to you, Paul, there was fallout from the Camp Mystic situation and, of course, the FEMA chair absence. Do you care to comment about that?
Yeah, well, let me yes, I'll answer that question. Let me just follow up what June says. I think that what's likely to occur if we survive this, and if we get another president, a Democratic president in 4 years, is I think that the Department of Justice isn't going to be ready for it, but I think we could talk about prosecuting all of these people for all of what they've done for a long time. I don't think that's given our experience with Trump, it may not be a healthy experience. But I think a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where we call people like Bondi to task, people like Todd Blanche to task, people like Bove to task, and all of these people who are Trump's lackeys who do not care about the rule of law. I think that, I look forward to that day. But those are, when you're talking about Todd Blanche and when you talk about Bove, those are, in my view, competent, corrupt loyalists, right? The reality is the Trump administration is saturated, thank God, to some degree, with incompetent clown car loyalists, right? And what you're talking about in terms of the FEMA administrator who testified before Congress this week, and it was appalling, right? We have 27 or more dead campers. We have hundreds of dead people, and he doesn't show up for a week. Now, remember, Trump took an incredible amount of flack when his person, Brownie, showed up on the second day and didn't do anything. This guy doesn't show up for a week. And when he's testifying before Congress, it is absolutely obvious that he's incompetent. And the problem with that kind of incompetence in FEMA is you have dead people. And I'm not saying he caused the death of those people, but I'm saying FEMA is about reacting quickly in a case of emergency. And when you have incompetent people, you're going to have more dead people. That's just the way it is. So that's what we have. Then we have another example, Elena Haba, right? The acting U.S. attorney for New Jersey. The district judges are so appalled by her incompetence and unethical behavior, they don't nominate her to carry on until she can be confirmed by the Senate. We have that kind of incompetence, which goes to the root of part of what the Department of Justice is today, and that is a bunch of people who are just loyalists. And they're incompetent people, and they have no idea what they're doing, but they're just going to salute and do whatever Trump says they are. So we have that dichotomy, in my view, between the competent but semi-evil loyalists, and we have the incompetent loyalists who are just going to make things a lot worse. I don't know if we're not in the same place, regardless of both of them, but I think that the fallout of that is going to impact the voters. And I think if you turn from the Justice Department to the economy, his administration is saturated with incompetent people dealing with the economy, including Trump himself. And I think that that's going to have a much greater impact on the voting population going forward. My 2 cents again.
Paul, were you referring to the heck of a job Brownie comment?
Yes.
Yeah, that was Bush. That was Bush.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that was Katrina.
Yes, but that he showed up at least, right?
Yes.
This guy doesn't even show up.
And just to be absolutely clear, and what Paul is saying, when we say they're loyal, we don't mean they're loyal to the Constitution, to the code of ethics. They're disloyal to all those things. They are personally loyal to the felon in chief.
Well, in addition to that, maybe as a closeout statement, Bill, I don't know if you were aware of it, but the Senate was tabling Trump's 20-year-old nominee for the National Labor Relations Board. Any comment on that? I mean, I'm reminded of big balls a couple of months ago with Doge.
I think the line is, life repeats and does so through absurdity. So again, this is what you get when you can only call on a tiny, tiny section of people to be your lieutenants, your princelings out there to do things wrong. There just aren't enough of them that they've been able to identify, right? So they do crazy ass stuff, right? Some third person, six removed who gave money says, Fred ought to be given a job. And they put Fred in a position in which he has, and it's almost always he, unless they look like Melania, have no abilities, right? So you're going to get that. Again, you don't just get lying, you don't just get unethical, you get overwhelmingly incompetent. Not 100%. There are some competent evil people. I've met a number of them, but not enough to do an administration. And again, you have to remember how lazy Trump is, right? It's not like he comes in knowing a bunch of competent people. His lawyer that trained him, not in law, but in being a scumbag, was arguably the worst person of his generation, right? For how to do evil. That's his mentor. And his mentor's dead. So his mentor can't be feeding him all these things. And that is why his anti-immigration guy is so effective, because he's the bureaucrat inside that keeps on putting names up of some of the worst people in the world and constantly pushing him. But a whole bunch of these other folks, they just don't know what they're doing. Can you imagine coming in? You know that you're vastly above your head, that you have none of the abilities necessary for the job?
I doubt they know that, Bill.
Well, I'm sure they don't when they take the job.
Right.
The next day, when they get the briefing and they don't understand two-thirds of the words and none of the concepts, I think it probably begins dawning on them that they've got to have a different strategy, not one based on competence. They're going to lose, right? If they try to be out competent people, that's going to fail. So they're going to be bureaucratic infighters. Now, that's good news in many ways, because these are folks that will eat themselves and each other to some fair extent, right? They're nasty people. Their only skill is lying. They're going to lie about each other.
But think about what that does to the organization, right? Underneath you, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
all the good people leave.
Yes.
All the good people leave.
Yes. That is an advantage from their perspective.
Yes. We should understand that what we've seen is a wholesale attack on the competence of government. Doge and Trump make that visible. But if you look at public schools, okay, public schools have not recovered from the financial crisis. Richard Reeves, who writes about men and boys, the crisis in men and boys, bipartisan support, says, what do we need? We need more male secondary and elementary school teachers. Here's the truth. The high point of male involvement as secondary and elementary school teachers came circa 1990, when the wage gap between being a teacher and doing other kinds of things with similar skills was tiny. And men were about a third. What are they today? Men are back down to something like 22% of public school teachers. Why?
And falling.
Why? Because the gap between what school teachers are paid and the rest of the economy is something like 29%, the highest it's ever been. Men leave first. But public schools, when I talk to people about public schools, the assault on public school teachers, they say, oh, but the teachers are terrible. Well, when you starve the beast, the people who stay are two people, absolutely dedicated people who take a huge salary cut to do the work, and people who can't get another job quickly. And so what you have with public school teachers who aren't as prestigious as Department of Justice attorneys, nor as well paid, is you get a decline in the overall competence. And that then justifies cutting the money further. And the Supreme Court has said you want religious charter schools, you want, I'm going to get this mixed up, but you want to authorize, the goal is to get rid of public schools, to have religious schools, to have conservative schools, to have homeschooling. But it's part of it, and to replace it all with vouchers that reward the base and squeeze the poor. And the more that succeeds, the more the poor are worse off, the more their institutions have been destroyed. Public schools, unions, churches. People who don't feel good about themselves also don't go to church. The more that happens, the more they're open to right-wing messaging that's coming from the internet and the oligarchs who benefit.
Well, I might refer to it as Nightmare on Massachusetts or Pennsylvania Avenue, but and then some. But another episode in the books, and it was again as shocking as always. I want to thank, of course, Paul Peltier, William K. Black, June Carbone. My name is Patrick Lovell. Please check out thecon.tv. Please check out thenewuntouchables.com. We're going to unleash a series of essays on Substack and that growing presence there as well. And then also, please check out thecleannewdeal.org. And until next week, guys, I wish you a wonderful weekend, all things considered, and I hope the country's still standing next week when we resume our dialogue. Thank you, guys, again from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so very much, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys next time. Take care.
Keep the faith.